disclosure, I was invited by the Panzermuseum. In this video, we look at a protocol from a conference that Hitler and leading figures of the German Reich had in November 1941. The title is Tank Production and Anti-Tank Defense. It includes Hitler's opinion on the Panzer III, the future of the Sturmgeschütz production, as well as his views on anti-tank weapons and the future of the tank. The protocol seems to cover only what Hitler said, with a few minor additions by others at the end. Yet the audience was the top of the Reich. Figures from the OKW, the High Command of the Wehrmacht, the High Command of the Army, the Ministry of Weapons and Ammunition, as well as members from the industry, like Ferdinand Porsche. Yes, and that is how you pronounce the car as well. The E at the end isn't silent. Hitler started by stating that the success of the previous war years was due to two factors, in addition to the bravery of the soldiers and the art of leadership, the Luftwaffe and the Panzerwaffe, the Panzer arm. He then notes that this conference will cover the Panzer arm. He continues with the number of panzer divisions deployed in Poland, France and the Soviet Union, which allowed for various successes, and that a single division in North Africa stopped the crisis there. Yet he notes, the experiences in the Eastern Campaign prove that we are at the turning point. He explains that German anti-tank weapons can't deal properly with some Soviet tanks. Note he of course said Russian, and also not with British infantry tanks. He is clearly referring to the Soviet KV-1, KV-2, T-34 and the British Matilda II tanks. He then continues, the age of the tank may soon be over. It is important for us to use the time remaining to fulfill our tasks, while tank formations can still be used as offensive weapons. Once our European tasks have been fulfilled, this development can only be a good thing for us, for then we will be able to defend our heritage, exploiting the defensive power of our defenses over tanks and repel any attack. This needs some contrast. Contrary to what some people claim, Hitler did not underestimate the United States' potential. As outlined in this video with Dr. Schmieder, Hitler noted that only a very strong country that itself had the resources of a whole continent available could face off against the United States. Hitler underestimated how quickly the United States mobilized its full potential. Yet considering that in the First World War the United States' industrial mobilization had serious issues, his assumption was reasonable and not a major misjudgment as some hindsight warriors like to claim. To give just one quote, when the United States entered World War I on 6 April 1917, it was ill prepared to meet the challenges and demands of mass industrialization mobilization. Output of most equipment and munitions did not begin to meet wartime requirements until just a few months before armistice, on November 11, 1918. Some equipment, such as tanks, never did. Before we continue with the details on anti-tank weapons and armor, the visit to the Panzermuseum and this video was made possible by my Patreon and subscribers supporters. Sadly, due to major changes over the last months, I had become far more dependent on your support than ever before. You guys are keeping the channels going. If you like what I do and want me to continue doing it here on YouTube, thank you for considering supporting me on Patreon or Subscribestar. Links in the description. Yet, let's move on. Hitler continues that it is important to improve the tanks and anti-tank weapons to deal with the enemy. He notes that it must be assumed that the enemy knows about the Panzergranate 40, which was an armor-piercing composite rigid shell that had a higher penetration as regular shells, but required tungsten. He particularly notes the enemy likely also produces something similar or prepares to, since on the world market this metal becomes increasingly rare. He then notes it is not known if the enemy knows about German hollow-charged shape-charged rounds, also called heat for high explosive anti-tank. He continues that due to increase in anti-tank weapon caliber, that the armor of the tanks must be improved as well, and that this will be done at the cost of lower mobility. He then discusses how the armor of existing tanks can be improved. It is difficult to decide whether to stubbornly increase the armor thickness or switch to standoff armor. For the Panzergranate 40, the problem of reinforcing the armor has been solved by the standoff armor. Some of the enemy anti-tank guns are neutralized by the standoff armor. However, the standoff armor does not provide protection against hollow charge shells. The standoff armor is smashed on the first hit. The standoff armor therefore only provides partial protection. The first requirement is to equip all units combat vehicles with standoff armor by spring 1942. Where the fewing slits do not allow for standoff armor, the armor thickness itself must be increased. This needs some clarification and correction. As far as I know, the information about hollow charges is incorrect here. The issue with the aspect about smashing the armor. Such rounds generally only make a very small hole, which should not destroy the standoff armor. Now, it is possible that the protocol is wrong here and it was not smashed, that was originally said. But even then, the statement does not make much sense to me. But maybe I'm missing something. Anyway, he then notes that the penetration values of German anti-tank guns needs to be increased. Yet that a delay in production of these weapons is not feasible. He notes that the current guns and the new ones need both an increase in range and penetration capabilities. There's zero mention how this should be possible, whereas usually there's at least a suggestion or a trade-off mentioned. In this case, nothing. Next, Hitler talks about new tanks. He particularly noted that the number of types must be limited. About the Panzer III and the future plans, he notes, the Panzer III is an unsuccessful design. The weight of the vehicle is disproportionate to its inadequate armament with 3.7 and 5.0 centimeter guns. It is necessary to limit ourselves to 3 types. Light type as reconnaissance vehicle, the current Panzer III, medium type Panzer IV, heavy type, designed by Henschel Waffenamt, and Porsche. In addition, an extra heavy type is to be developed by Professor Porsche so that we are in the position to provide for the future. High military values also require high technical values. As many of you know, the Panzer III is my favorite tank, yet in terms of effectiveness and longevity, I agree that the Panzer III was a serious issue at this point. It costs about the same as the Panzer IV, but couldn't be fitted properly with a long-barreled 75mm gun in the turret. In terms of types, here I think the light type should have been cancelled completely, instead armored cars or half-tracks should be used. The heavy type, as you probably know, are referring to the Henschel and Porsche Tigers. The next part Hitler covers are Sturmgeschütze. He specifically notes that independently from the previous mentioned tanks, the production of Sturmgeschütze continues. He notes that the motorized infantry divisions, later called Panzergrenadierdivisionen, should receive tanks and that their Sturmgeschütze should be assigned to the regular infantry divisions. He particularly notes that the Sturmgeschütze belong to the infantry, which is also in line with the original memo by von Manstein. He then adds that the Sturmgeschütze require a gun that is effective against tanks and that they need more ammo. He then talks about mobility. The speed of the assault gun can be reduced if it is used solely as infantry escort protection and tasks that fall of the tanks are taken away from it. A speed of 12 km per hour is sufficient for employment with infantry divisions. The speed issue here is highly debatable, since the StuG should also serve as a tank killer. As such, a certain amount of speed is necessary if the StuG should be able to react to enemy break-ins or perform flanking maneuvers. Keep in mind, in late war, some infantry division layouts had an authorized strength of 10 StuGs at most, but such divisions covered an area of several or even several dozens of kilometers. Finally, Hitler covers mass production. It is a bitter mistake to believe that we are a leading nation in the exploitation of manufacturing possibilities. The designs are at odds with practical production possibilities, for instance in the exploitation of stamping and casting possibilities, etc. Therefore, much greater consideration must be given to production in the designs. He suggests to consult private companies, since those have to calculate and work economically, unlike state-operated companies. He continues that a simplification of the construction elements is crucial to improve mass production. It is by no means accurate to assume that this compromises the purpose or usability of the weapon. Standardization and typification encourage the scrapping of vehicles that are not operational. This creates a natural spare parts warehouse, which we currently lack to a large extent due to the diversity of types. The parts of one vehicle must be interchangeable with those of another at any time, for instance track wheels. He then notes that producing vehicles that survive 120 years, which seems a rather odd and specific number, makes not much sense, while it is known that after 2 to 3 years they are basically done for. He also talks about prime movers and that they must be made simpler and that beauty is irrelevant. The most important aspect is usability that allows for mass production. As outlined in my video about the Schwere Wehrmachtsschlepper, there were several attempts about this, but most of them failed. He then particularly mentions the success of the upcoming MG42. The fact that simplifications can be beneficial is demonstrated by the design of a new machine gun, which despite its simplified construction and reduced cost is more effective and more suitable for use in the field. This statement is correct. The MG42 in comparison to the MG34 was easier and cheaper to build and far less prone to jamming due to dirt or other issues. To summarize, this protocol from the conference, assuming it is correct, shows that Hitler's assumptions and observations in most cases are in line with current research and knowledge. About the end of the tank, he noted that this could be a possibility, which is far more reasonable statement than what I have seen and read over the years in various contexts. There are two major errors I could find. The first was the statement that a hit by a hollow charge would smash the standoff armor. The second was about the fact that the StuG could be slow while at the same time requiring it to be able to deal with tanks, which I would consider a tactical mismatch. The various other statements about the lack of standardization, lack of design, accounting for mass production and further increasing caliber of anti-tank weapons were all correct. Thank you to the Panzermuseum for inviting me, thank you to all my supporters.